So our guest speaker today is Rep.Strom Peterson. Strom is a business owner in the community of the Cheesemongers Table. Also a long-serving board member for the Edmonds Chamber, and just spent 175 days stuck in Olympia for his first year. So Rep.Strom Peterson, our state rep for the 21st Legislative District. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me if I don't stand here? Am I projecting enough, Mr. Meeks? Mike said he was going to sit in the front row, and I was a little concerned. So I'm glad that they shoved me into the back. I'm Strom Peterson, your representative from the 21st District. This was my first term down in Olympia. Yes, we set a record in our 100-day session. We went 176 days. Maybe not a record that we really set out to break, but that's kind of the reality of divided government. But funny, just before we get started, in the Democratic caucus, we meet every day to discuss bills and go over things. Very strict cell phone rule. It used to be that if your cell phone went off, then you had to bring donuts, but in this kind of new era of health, it's $20. So you have people texting each other hoping that they're going to get caught. I don't think he turned his phone on, so people are making calls. So there is some fun levity, and then it's nice at the end of the year they actually collect that money, and they usually take the proceeds down to one of the shelters in Olympia. So that's also nice. So they'll use it to buy flowers if somebody's lost a family member. It goes to good work. So that's a lot of the fun of what happens in Olympia, and that sense of camaraderie, and despite the fact that we do go through some of these grueling days and weeks and 76 days. But it was a successful year. I think we had some successes. We had some, at least from my perspective, some frustrations. But I do, I'm kind of an optimist at heart. I do like to key on a little bit about some of the successes that we had, especially for the 21st District, for Edmonds, for South Snohomish County. We had, obviously education was the big sticking point, and this year being our budget year, we had to find money for that, and everybody knew that was going to be a struggle. And it was, since the 176 days. But we started the year off trying to get a few things done with both houses, both the Senate and the House, Republicans and Democrats, that we could all agree on. And one of the big victories this year was our funding for mental health. We spent nearly $100 million to improve access to mental health in our state, as well as $100 million in construction money to expand access so people can have beds if they're in a crisis situation. This was a great bipartisan effort, and some of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle deserve an incredible amount of credit. They've really been working on this for the last couple of years. And it's interesting that just before the session started, I was up in Everett with the the South County, the Economic Alliance for Snohomish County, and they had their list of priorities. And so this is basically a group of chambers and business people from South County, and I know some people here are involved in that. And I was really impressed that one of their top priorities was mental health funding, because they knew as a business community that it's really how we treat those people that are in crisis that reflect on our values as business owners, as just people in the community. So I was really proud that they put that on their agenda. Normally a business organization might not steer their efforts that way, but they did, and it was effective. So I'm really proud of the work that we did with that. That was a great success and a great bipartisan success, I think. I'm going to pull out my notes. I've got some here somewhere just to make sure I don't miss anything. Another important thing so if you don't know, I'm a Democrat. Proud to be, and if you don't follow state politics, and I don't blame you if you don't. The House has a very slim majority in my caucus, and the Senate has a very slim majority in the Republican caucus. So one of the reasons we went 176 days is we have divided government. And divided government is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, we have such a diverse population here in the state of Washington. For those, you know, east of the mountains, the north, south, here in the Puget Sound region. So it takes a long time to figure out our differences and try to find some common ground. And as I said, we did on a number of issues. We're still working on some others. One of the issues that I'm really proud of is what we were able to accomplish with at least starting to mend the social safety net that we have in the state of Washington. Obviously, over the last 8 or so years with the Great Recession, some pretty drastic cuts were made in state budgets in past years, and I'm very thankful that I didn't have to be there to take some of those votes, talking to some of my colleagues. Again, on both sides of the aisle, these were really hard votes to take, but we have to have a balanced budget. So we were able to put $40 million, about a 9% increase back into some of our TANF and food programs for the poorest among us. Because I think, as everybody knows, despite what we've seen in the economy and the great growth that we've had, especially in our region, that there are a lot of people that are still struggling, and that's just not making it. So it was a step in the right direction to really create that safety net, and to help those people that haven't yet benefited from the economic boom that we're going through. We're hoping to create more opportunities for them through education, job training, and a lot of the other things we can do statewide to help that. But in the meantime, at least there's a cushion there that if they're falling through, that we're able to catch them. So I was really proud of that, and really proud as a freshman that I was able to stand up with a lot of my newly elected colleagues, both the freshman class, where we had 4 in the Democratic caucus, but the sophomore class that had about 13, and we as a group stood up and kind of demanded this kind of funding. And the leadership listened. That's, I think, one thing that's one of the many lessons that I've taken from Olympia is people will listen to the lowly freshman or the most experienced legislator. That people have open ears, and this is true on both sides of the aisle. I think there's, especially in the House, where I'm familiar with the culture in the House, is really supportive, no matter which side of the aisle. Obviously, there are bills that Republicans are going to introduce that we don't want to pass, and that we're going to make sure they don't pass, and they're going to fight to make sure that some of our bills don't pass, and that's good. But by the end of the day, it's a group of people that can shake hands and kind of enjoy each other's companies and appreciate where everybody's coming from. And I think that's something that's really important that we're still able to hold on to in Olympia. I think that's something that is not happening, as they call it, in the other Washington, which is unfortunate. But in Olympia, rest assured that at least there is some of that still remains. And some issues get really contentious, but by the end of the day, everybody can walk away friends and still in disagreement. The other remarkable thing about Washington, and where you should be very happy about your tax dollars, is the staff that we have in Olympia. So we have kind of 3 different staffs. We have the Democratic caucus. We have our own staff, dedicated young people that are, progressive values and, more politically minded. The Republican caucus has their staff of dedicated young people with more conservative values that are really excited. But most importantly, we have a nonpartisan staff that is the Office of Program Research, which is run by the state, incredibly neutral in their observations and incredible amount of work that they do. I remember I think the first email I sent to somebody on the OPR staff, I was asking for some information. I'm not even sure what it was about. Sent an email, probably 10 in the morning. Jan, can you get me some information on this issue and something I'm kind of looking into? I get an email back in about half an hour. Is it okay if I don't get that information to you until this afternoon? And I'm thinking, well, I was thinking next week would be pretty nice. But that's the kind of dedication they have. And as as much as we can kind of complain about the hours that we put in, that the staff, it's remarkable, especially in those last days when they're trying to put in the budget. They're literally at work for 24, maybe 48 hours straight. And they seem to love their jobs, so that's great. So if there's anywhere where your tax dollars are well spent, and I think left, right, or center, anybody that works down in Olympia would agree that the staff that we have down there is just remarkable. Education, as I said, education was and still is the big sticking point down in Olympia. As you know, probably read, we're in contempt of court. The contempt order came down before I was elected. Since I'm a member of the legislature, I'm still in contempt of court. And most recently, the Supreme Court is fining the state legislature or the state $100,000 a day until we properly fund education. There's a lot of consternation about that, but it says in the Constitution that educating and I'm paraphrasing, educating the children in Washington is the paramount duty of the state of Washington, which is a great thing to have in a Constitution. Funding it gets very tricky. Over probably the last 30 years or so, we've relied more and more on local tax levies. You folks here that are in the Edmonds School District, thank you for pretty much passing, I think, every school levy that's been on the ballot in probably the last 20 years. But there are a lot of communities in the state that don't have that luxury. So there's a real imbalance in how different school districts are funded and how basically they can pay their teachers. We rely more and more on those local levies to pay teachers, and that's according to the Supreme Court, and I would agree with that that's really unconstitutional. So we're trying to find a balance. We made some headway along that. We added $1.3 billion with a B dollars to education, through K through 12 education, which is a record. It's an incredible investment. We're reducing class sizes in K through 3. We still have, there was an initiative passed a couple of years ago to reduce class sizes, or last year, K through 12. We didn't have the money to go that far, so we looked at the data and realized that K through 3 is where you really, really make an impact with smaller class sizes. It's important in the later grades, absolutely, but if we can get those young kids into smaller classes, we'll really make a difference. So we have money to go through to do that, and of course a lot of that money includes the actual building of classrooms. It's one thing to think, okay, instead of 30 kids, we'll have 20 kids. Well, we have to take those 10 kids and build something. Unfortunately, sometimes that might be a portable, which I don't think is anybody's number one option, but these things happen. So we have money to actually build the classrooms. And we also have money to make sure that we're doing it correctly. We're partnering with Washington State University to actually look at the statistics of what different school districts need. Because there is not a good holistic view of what's happening throughout the state with each school district. We have different information coming in. So that's important that we have the right numbers so we can really move forward. Another exciting thing that we did this year in very much a bipartisan effort, and we're the only state in the country that did it, we are actually cutting tuition costs in higher education. I think that's really important for groups like this, for chambers and business people who are going to be looking for new employees that are well-educated. And not only in the four-year schools, that was the initial proposal from the Senate, was that we would cut tuition in four-year schools. A lot of us on the House side fought to make sure that that included our community colleges as well. So Edmonds Community College, which I've been a huge supporter of, and I know the Chamber has done some great work with the community college. I say that because I have a bunch of employees that go to that community college. So they're going to get a tuition break as well, and I think that's a really exciting step. It's hard to fund. We have to make sure that we're not just cutting tuition and leaving universities to figure out ways to make up that money. So we were able to backfill some of that money to make sure that universities stay whole and are able to do what they need to do as far as attracting the right number of people and paying their professionals as well as the rest of the staff that runs our 2 and our 4-year education. And we also made unprecedented efforts in early learning. And I think Deb would probably really appreciate this. about $160 million. So these are the kids that just aren't getting that support from home. So they're going into first grade or into kindergarten already behind. So we have programs and projects lined up that are innovative, that are really cutting edge as far as the nation goes, to make sure that these kids that are going into first grade have a chance. Because if you lose them by the time they're in first or second grade, statistics show that their graduation rates are just plummeting. So that's really exciting. And our neighboring representative, Ruth Kagi from the 32nd, who represents part of South Edmonds and Shoreline, is the champion of this. And if you see her or have a chance to talk with her about it, this has been her life's work, I think, and she's been at this for probably at least 10 years in the state legislature. And this was a great victory for her, and she would never say that. But really for our kids, and in 15 years down the road, when these 5-year-old kids are 20, it's a great victory for the rest of us, because they'll be educated and be active members of our communities. A couple of things that we got done locally. So those were some of the broad policy things, education, that are affecting kind of statewide, mental health issues that obviously affect our community, but are really important statewide. We worked really hard as a team here in the 21st District, and actually a lot of our representatives on both sides of the aisle here in Snohomish County. But I would be remiss without giving kudos to my fellow elected officials here in the 21st. Lillian Ortiz-Self, my seatmate, and Mark Elias, our senator. We are, and I don't even think I'm bragging. Well, I'm bragging, but I don't think I'm being overly boastful when I say this. I really believe we may have the best delegation of any district in the state. And it's because we all have kind of different passions, and we trust each other and we work together. So Lillian is an educator in the Edmonds School District. She's a school counselor. So she's front lines when it comes to education issues, and especially kids that are in crisis. She's there. And that is a passion of hers and a knowledge base that for me is great to have. To know that I can ask somebody what's happening in an education bill, and I know that I can get a great answer. Marco has been a steadfast proponent of progressive transportation issues throughout Snohomish County, from the time when he was on the Mukilteo City Council some years ago, and his time in the House and now in the Senate. And then I bring a real passion to environmental issues, as well as my business background as a small business owner. So we'd have lunch once a week, kind of key each other in on what's going on, because there are so many moving parts in Olympia. I don't know the bill count this year, but I know in some years that they've passed 1,000 bills off the floor of the House. A lot of them are really minuscule. They had to turn their semicolon to a colon or something like that. But there's so much information that there's no way you can read every bill. Somebody asked me, they said, oh yeah, somebody told me that you don't even read every bill. And I said, well, they're correct. I don't read every bill. But what you do is like a group like this, you forge relationships and you trust somebody when they come to you and say, this is important, this is what we're working on. And they can give you either a 30-second elevator speech or just can kind of nod and say, yeah, this aligns with your values, this is something that will be beneficial to your district. And you forge those relationships of trust. And that's great. And again, this is really even an across the aisle thing. There are certain bills that come from the other side that I've been able to chat with Norma Smith, who's a little farther north in Snohomish County. She's a Republican, but just has some fantastic ideas on education and some environmental issues as well. So you forge those relationships so you can move forward without being bogged down. It's a lot of paperwork. I mean, we have our iPad things, but so transportation was a great victory for Snohomish County and for Edmonds. I think, as all of you are aware, we've had a number of issues with our train conflicts down by the ferry and at Dayton. I was able to get at least some seed money. We got $500,000 in the transportation budget to bring in experts to study what the alternatives might possibly be. Mayor Erling has appointed a task force. I don't know if anybody in here is on said task force, but But people from DOT, from the ferries, from the county, citizens of Edmonds, so it's somebody, this is going to be crucial as we move forward, as rail traffic continues to grow, that we figure out something to do, because I know economically it's a huge burden on our community as well as the community on the peninsula. So we need to make sure that we figure out some way to do that. So that was a great victory for Edmonds. We have a fantastic project up on Highway 99 that's going to improve sidewalks and lighting and stormwater and really hopefully attract some great development up on Highway 99, similar to some of the development that's been happening down in Shoreline. So we've been able to bring that back to the district. Community transit is, we're hoping to get light rail basically from Tacoma to Everett. That will be coming up on a ballot sometime soon for you if you're interested in supporting light rail and that expansion. So the idea of being able to jump on the train to the airport, pretty exciting. It's like, yeah, I just missed a flight on Sunday. Late. Yeah, cruise ship day at the airport is just brutal. And then we brought some great things home to the county as a whole. When the governor's first transportation budget came out early in the session, there was kind of a big black dot over Snohomish County. It seemed like the governor kind of forgot. There's the second largest county in the state. So we had monthly meetings with every member of the Snohomish County delegation, both on the Senate side and the House side, Republicans and Democrats, and sat down and went through a list of transportation projects that were crucial to our economy and to our quality of life, and we did really well. And again, that's really thanks to Mark Elias, who helped forge the Senate transportation budget along with Senator Hobbs, and then our folks, Lillian serves on the transportation committee as well. So that was a great victory for Snohomish County, and again, the Economic Alliance of Snohomish County, that was their number one priority, was transportation funding. And so we were able to get that done. And that was in tight budget times. I think that was a great victory. It's, we passed a gas tax to help pay for these, which I kind of grumble about, a lot of people grumble about, but at least we know that money I think is being very well spent, and is being very well spent here in our region to boost the economy and for everything from including things like safe routes to schools, to make sure that we get sidewalks so kids can walk to school instead of having to be driven, bike paths. So it creates a broad network of transportation. So it's not just asphalt and highways, some pretty creative solutions there, which I'm excited about and supporting. And then even drilling down a little bit more to Edmonds specific things. Got some great successes in the capital budget. The Edmonds Fishing Pier is going to be revitalized. Bob McChesney from the port, I know, is well aware of this, but we've got some good money to do that, and that's an incredible tourist attraction for the port and for the city of Edmonds, and it's in horrible disrepair, both kind of structurally and really environmentally. So they're going to go in there, make probably a world-class fishing pier, which is, I think, going to be great for our community, and really make sure that we're well aware of what means so much to us here in Edmonds and Puget Sound, and that is the Puget Sound, and how we can use that both economically and as well as just quality of life. So that was nice. Civic Playfield, we have some money to purchase Civic Playfield, which is something that the city of Edmonds has been talking about for maybe decades. The school district currently owns it, where the Taste of Edmonds is located, and we have secured funds to help pay for that if those negotiations go well. And that will be a real anchor park and outdoor activity space for the city of Edmonds, where we can decide what's going to happen there, and we get to, as a community, get to make the decisions, as opposed to the school district. And, God bless the school district, but having that kind of anchor park in the center of town is really exciting. So the city's going to partner with the Boys and Girls Club and different groups to make sure that that moves forward well. And then perhaps my proudest achievement with the capital budget is a new roof and HVAC system for our Edmonds Center for the Arts. Something that if you've been to the ECA gym and had to step around a bucket or two, then you would realize that this is a crucial bit of money to help really save such an important cultural and economic aspect of our city. We're also working with the county. The county has some money for us as well, so we're looking at a new roof for the gym, as well as upgrades to the HVAC system. So very excited about that, and thanks to Joe McElwain and Bob for being advocates down in Olympia when it comes to that. And kind of on that note, I would like to also give kudos to a number of the other elected officials here in the 21st District, especially Mayor Erling and Mayor Gregerson from Mukilteo. Great advocates for their communities. They would come down and testify for bills. Mayor Erling was down a number of times testifying on transportation issues. And that really makes a difference when it comes to getting legislation passed. And Bob McChesney came down with a report a couple of times. One, as a newly elected official, it's always nice to see a friendly face that you recognize. So come down. But it's not only elected officials, it's private citizens that are involved with professional organizations. It makes a huge difference to come down and introduce yourself, and we have these 15-minute blocks, which seems odd that our schedule kind of gets divided up into 15-minute blocks, but the amount of information that I can get in that 15 minutes and just to be able to put a face with an issue that's coming up is really important and really effective. So if you have an issue that's coming up, whether it's something with Goodwill or the funeral industry, those personal contacts make a huge difference, and not only for me, but talking to my fellow legislators. So be sure to take advantage of that. Like I said, it's fun to learn about all of these new things that are happening in our communities, but it's great to be able to put a face with an issue. Another big issue that we dealt with and that really affects Edmonds is the oil train transportation issue. And I know that the Chamber has worked on this, the Port has worked on this, different civic groups. And so we passed an oil train transportation bill, Bill 1449. Jessamine Farrell, who's I think in the 48th District in Seattle, did an incredible amount of work on this bill. I was a co-sponsor, and by the end of the negotiations, it's a good bill. It's not a great bill. But this is the art of negotiation. What is important about this bill is it's very much a good public safety bill. So as many of you may know, the increase in oil trains along our rail line has increased 100-fold in the last couple of years. So now we see trains that are 130 cars long, carrying different volatilities of oil. Our first responders didn't know when they were coming, didn't know what they were carrying. So God forbid there was some sort of derailment and an explosion or some sort of leak or tragedy. Our first responders wouldn't know exactly what they were dealing with. With this bill, they will. So BNSF and the oil companies have to give our first responders 24 hours notice as to what kind of fuel is being transported, when it's coming, so they can have the proper equipment in place, and if something happens, they know exactly how to respond, because there are very different ways to respond to different types of spills. So that was big. We were also able to get, to help pay for that, do a 4-cent a barrel tax on oil coming by train. We currently have a 4-cent a barrel tax with oil coming by ship and by pipeline, but trains weren't included. I was a little frustrated by the 4-cent a barrel tax because that tax hasn't been changed since 1994. And you look at the volatility of oil prices, 4 cents even now when oil's at $39 a barrel. you add 4 cents onto that barrel, I don't think that's shattering anybody's profit margins, but that argument didn't work. But at least that helps pay for some of the mitigation. And so, like I said, it was a good victory when it comes to public safety, and some mitigation when it comes to the possibility of the spill. But I think we have a lot of work to do on the environmental side of transporting these kind of fuels through our state. And then finally, next year. So this year, just to recap, usually the speaker or somebody in leadership will give a freshman a nice little bill. It passes, they haze you a little bit, and the hazing ritual has to change. Basically, so if you have one of these tidy little bills, it goes up to a vote on the House, and they will usually pass unanimously. You know, they're very simple. So they start tabulating the votes, and we have electronic voting, and suddenly everybody's voting no. And you see, the first person that this happens to, it's kind of funny. And they see this man, they're looking, what did I do? And people get up and give speeches, and they're saying, I appreciate the good freshman's thoughts on this, but they don't realize the extenuating circumstances, and so I have to vote no and encourage my fellow Republicans to vote no. And then at the last minute, everybody.
Oh my God.
And it's really funny the first time, but after, like, you know, there were 14 freshmen. You know, after the 14th, it didn't quite work. So I did pass a bill off the floor of the House, but actually a couple, and they both died in the Senate. So I didn't get my picture with the governor. But that's okay, because I had some bills that I think were pretty exciting that I'm bringing back. One is a paint recycling bill. Oregon and some other states have a great program where you can take those half-empty gallons of paint in your garage. I think by last count I have 12. You can take them to your local paint store, and they in turn will take it to a paint recycling center that can remix and recycle the paint. It's remarkable. Portland has it. I'm hoping to take a tour sometime next month. They make 25 or so different colors, and the colors are very consistent, and they get to just reuse this. They sell it for almost pennies on the dollar. I think a gallon of paint's about $8 instead of 30 or 40. Habitat for Humanity is one of the biggest purchasers of this paint. So I'm excited to work on that again. It would include a fee on a gallon of paint, and that's where we ran into a little bit of trouble. But it's a nice bill. The paint industry is actually behind this bill, and a lot of environmental groups and cities and counties are behind this, because actually trying to get rid of paint in your regular waste stream is incredibly expensive. So I'm bringing that bill back, so keep an eye out for that. I think I might have some solid Senate support on that, so we'll get it past the House again and over into the Senate, hopefully pass there. Working on a bill to help our pollinators. I think we've all read about the importance of bees and hive collapse, but I have a little pilot project where DOT, instead of just ripping out invasive species, they'll have to replant those with native species that are high pollen producers. So it's a great opportunity to keep our wild honeybees especially flourishing. So it's important for our agriculture industry, and on a very kind of selfish note, I sell some local honey at my shop. So I like my beekeepers. I've got one up in Skagit Valley and one right here in Edmonds that has about 50 hives throughout the city. So part of that is a little selfish. And then you find bills you never knew that you'd be interested in, things like septic tanks. I am now the septic tank guy in the House of Representatives. And it's quite fascinating. So I'm having a meeting down next week in Olympia about septic tanks. There are 10 or 15 people from around the state that we're going to meet and try to pass a bill to make sure that it's a water quality issue. It really affects our shellfish growers around the state. It's much more interesting than just septic tanks. But, so it's fascinating what comes across your desk. And one other issue that's been important to me that we passed a really good bill with my friend Representative Brady Walkinshaw is dealing with opioid addiction and the crisis of heroin overdoses in our communities. Everett and South Snohomish County has some of the highest heroin overdose death rates in the state. So we're working hard to work with both the pharmaceutical industry, our first responders, and anybody that we can, our public health officials, to see what we can do to stem that tide. Because it hasn't been going away. It's been increasing pretty dramatically over the last 5 or 10 years. So those are a couple of things that I'm working on, that I'm excited about. And like I said, if you have ideas or concerns in your business or something that's happening in your community, let me know. Contact my office. It's amazing what we can shake loose sometimes. A friend that needs some help with the Department of Transportation, we were able to get some answers for her and her business. So use us as a resource. That's what we're there for. And it's really fun to make those connections with people in our community. And sometimes you just have to figure out a way to maneuver through, it's a big bureaucracy. And sometimes a call from a state representative actually helps. Sometimes it might hurt, I don't know. But we have a good system in the State House of really following up on constituent concerns. So no matter how small you think it is or how big, let my office know and we'll find the right person to put you in contact with. But in general, it was, people asked, well, did you like it? And I loved it. It's fantastic. Surrounded by great people, made some great friends down there. Both sides of the aisle. One of my favorite fellow freshmen is Tom Dent from Eastern Washington. He's a buffalo rancher and flies a crop duster and is about as conservative as I am progressive. But he's just a great guy. I made him give me one of his bumper stickers. Well, I might not put it on my car, Tom, but I want it in my office. So they're just great people that are serving our state. It's an exciting place to be. If you have any interest in coming down for a tour or just chatting, please let me know. I'd love to see you down there and love to see you around here, down at the Cheesemonger. I'm always up for political questions too. Even if I'm at work, I'm a sucker for it. And on that note, I would love if anybody had any questions about things that are happening in Olympia. Mr. Meeks.
So how do all these bills come to your attention? Do they just, from various interest groups, they just come to your desk and you say, yeah, I'll sponsor it or I'll send it on to somebody else?
Yes. Yeah, so we'll have industry will come in. The paint bill, for example, this was a bill that a friend of mine had worked on for a couple of years, but an industry will often come with a bill. And the process, government works at a glacial pace, which is usually good. I think if we were really quick and nimble, we would screw up a lot more things than we do. So it's good to work at that kind of slow pace. I mean, it takes a bill a few years to get through. But every once in a while, a legislator will have something big will hit the paper. This year we had a big controversy with vaccines in schools. June Robinson, representative from Everett from the 38th District, who was one of the most fantastic state representatives we had, kind of took that bull by the horn and introduced a bill that limited the excuses for not getting your children vaccinated. Headline grabbing, bill ended up failing, died in the Senate, where most things go to die. But so every once in a while, it might be just something new that hits the papers that suddenly is a problem that we didn't realize that gets turned into a bill. Bob.
Well, as you know, the port's in the tourism promotion business, and tourism is really important for this community. Appreciate your support for the statewide tourism funding bill, but it didn't pass. What do you think the prospects are for moving that forward in the next session?
I would imagine it's the next session. I'm really curious. I haven't been in a second session yet anyway, so my learning is still. But I think with the McCleary issue that we're going to be facing with education funding. My concern is that it's going to take up the vast majority of the 60 days. Our next session is a 60-day session. So I'm concerned that some of these other things that we'll often look at in off years aren't going to get looked at. But I think the more and more information that's out there that people realize and you know, our thoughts obviously and prayers go out to the people in Eastern Washington facing these fires. But if anything really brings the importance of tourism dollars home, it's going to be what's happening to Chelan, where they're going to lose an incredible percentage of what they would normally make because of these fires. And those are jobs and people's lives, and never mind just the physical aspect of something that burns down. These are long-term consequences. So I hope that some people that have been reluctant to support those might look a little more closely and realizing what tourism means to good paying jobs and our different communities, not only here in Edmonds, but around the state. Yes,
my name is Peggy Sanders, and I would love to meet with you sometime because one of the issues that we haven't touched on is the crushing cost to a family who has an elder who needs long-term care. Crushing. And I am an elder law and estate planning attorney, and they come into my office all the time going, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I've heard of bankruptcies, I've heard of all sorts of things that are created because mom needs 24/7 care. And there are a number of things. One specific proposal currently we're working up. I'm also the legislative chair for the Washington Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, and I'll fill you in more about that group when we have a chance. But we're working up a proposal for requiring that long-term care insurance providers pay benefits. If they pay benefits for skilled nursing in an assisted living facility or skilled nursing in a nursing home, they need to pay for skilled nursing that's provided by a licensed adult family home. Because more and more, those adult family homes are the only option, that's the one I was thinking of. The only option for families who are looking at somebody that they just cannot deal with all these problems. And Washington State is actually great with this because in a lot of states, you have to go to a nursing home to get help from Medicaid. In Washington State, there are programs where you can get, Medicaid assistance for assisted living and adult family homes. And I'll tell you what, those adult family homes, they're the only options, and it's going to be slow. So anyway, there's a couple of legislative proposals that we're working on as the Washington Academy of Elder Law Attorneys that I would love to talk to you about.
Excellent. Yeah, and that is one of, I wouldn't say it's one of the great unspoken issues because a lot of people are working on it and talking about it, but it was certainly one that wasn't at the forefront as much as it needs to be. We did have some success in helping support a lot of the home health care workers that are supported by the state. So that's good. So hopefully keeping those people with good paying jobs and benefits so they're able to do the work that needs to be done. And then we did some work with helping give DSHS some tools to go in and make sure that these adult family homes are being run correctly.
Mm-hmm. There's also there's a program that's called the Office of Public Guardianship, and it's on the block every year. And we have to, yell and scream and write letters and every year. And that is so important. But again,
I will give you a card. Absolutely.
thank you. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Anybody? Well, thank you all so much.